Right after Daniel set the last bouquet on his mother's grave, his phone suddenly buzzed. A young female voice, a little shaky but firm, cut through the cold, damp air of the cemetery. "Daniel? This is Lila, your mother's cleaning lady. I'm sorry for calling at a time like this, but you need to know a truth Mrs. Victoria wanted me to tell you on this exact day." Daniel froze. His heart pounded with every word she said. "Please, come see me as soon as you can, before it's too late." Then the call ended. That morning, the sky was covered in a heavy layer of gray clouds, as if the whole city was mourning Victoria Hale, a woman known for her massive fortune and a career that earned her deep respect. The church was solemnly decorated, filled with faces that had crossed her path: colleagues, business partners, the media, and a few people who had known her from the early days of her journey. In the middle of all that formality, Daniel felt small and out of place. He walked in wearing a neat black suit, but his face showed clear exhaustion. No one could see the storm building inside the 30-year-old man. Daniel couldn't tell whether he was hurting because he had lost his mother, or because the vague distance that had existed between them for years suddenly felt impossible to fill. Throughout the ceremony, Daniel didn't shed a single tear. Not because he didn't care. It was just that he didn't know the right way to feel the pain. His mother, Victoria, had always been the definition of a steel woman: successful, decisive, and never willing to show weakness. But that was exactly what made Daniel grow up feeling like he was just a shadow behind her meetings, her projects, and her endless business trips. In his memories, she was rarely present for the important moments in her son's life: the holidays, the school performances, the times Daniel needed her the most. The love was there somewhere, but it felt like a distant light you could see but never touch. As the prayers filled the room, Daniel overheard soft whispers from the guests. She was the symbol of success. No one ever knew what she was really thinking. She was strong, sometimes too strong. Daniel stood there, silent, like a spectator at his own mother's funeral. All those words of praise sounded like they were describing someone else. A woman everyone admired, yet one he never truly understood. A wave of loneliness rose in his chest and tightened around him. When the ceremony ended, cold winds swept across the cemetery. A light rain began to fall, drops landing on Daniel's black coat. He bowed his head one last time at his mother's grave, then slowly walked toward the path leading to the parking lot. That was when the phone in his pocket vibrated. An unknown number. Daniel wasn't planning to answer, but something made him stop. "Daniel? This is Lila Torres, your mother's cleaning lady." A young voice, steady and clear. Daniel froze. Cleaning lady? His mother had a young cleaning lady? He didn't remember ever seeing this girl at his mother's house. Lila kept speaking, her tone suddenly so serious it sent a chill down Daniel's spine. "You need to know a truth Mrs. Victoria kept hidden for years, and she wanted me to tell only you." Daniel held his breath. "But why? Why today?" he asked. Lila hesitated for a second, then answered, "Because she told me it could only be said on the day of her funeral." The last words echoed in Daniel's mind. A tight, uneasy feeling curled inside him. Why would his mother leave such a strange instruction? Why not tell him while she was still alive? And why through a cleaning lady he had never even met? Daniel tried to steady himself. "Lila, what do you need to tell me? Is it about my mother?" On the other end, Lila's voice shook slightly, but she stayed firm. "I'm sorry for adding more weight to what you're already going through. But you need to know the truth before it's too late. Please come to Mrs. Victoria's mansion. I'll be waiting." The call ended abruptly. Daniel stood still under the thickening rain. Questions rushed through his mind. What had his mother been hiding? What could a cleaning lady know that he didn't? And why did it have to be revealed only on the day his mother died? Even with his mind in knots, something in his heart told him that the call was no coincidence. The feeling was so clear that Daniel couldn't ignore it. He opened the car door and sat behind the wheel. Outside, the sky grew darker, as if warning him about an emotional journey filled with things he had never expected. Daniel tightened his grip on the wheel, let out a long breath, and started the engine. He needed to know the truth, even if that truth changed everything he thought he knew about his mother. Rain slid across the windshield as Daniel stopped in front of the familiar iron gate of the mansion. Lila's call kept replaying in his mind, each word tightening the confusion inside him. Even as an adult, he still felt small standing before this massive house, a place full of memories that never once made him feel like he belonged. The mansion was unusually quiet. The windows were still lit, as if his mother were just in the kitchen or in her office, not gone from this world forever. Daniel stood at the door, took a deep breath, and knocked softly. The door opened almost immediately. Lila appeared. A young woman, maybe 23, 25, with a gentle face that put people at ease. Her eyes were sad, but not weak. There was something in her eyes, steadiness, respect, and a hint of hesitation when she looked at him. Lila wore dark jeans and a simple white shirt, her hair tied up neatly. Even though she was just a cleaning lady, she carried herself with a kind of quiet elegance. Daniel felt a flicker of surprise. Not because of how she looked, but because he couldn't understand why his mother had a young employee like her that he had never once seen. "Daniel." Lila bowed her head slightly. "Please come in." Daniel stepped into the living room, the place where his mother used to sit and read the paper every morning. The place where the two of them had spent silent evenings, each lost in their own world. The familiar scent was still there, the jasmine fragrance his mother loved. A soft scent completely opposite from the sharp decisions she made in the business world. Daniel looked around, then spoke, his voice cautious. "What do you need to tell me? And why the urgency?" Lila gestured for him to sit. She stayed standing across from him, her hands lightly interlaced. "Daniel," she began, each word careful and firm, "there is a part of Mrs. Victoria's life that you never knew." Daniel frowned. That opening made it feel like he was about to hear something impossible. How could a cleaning lady know anything personal about his mother? "Why would my mother confide in you?" he asked, unable to hide the irritation in his voice. "Why wouldn't she tell her own son?" Lila didn't look away. "I understand what you're thinking, but Mrs. Victoria didn't see me as an outsider. She just needed someone who would listen." Her answer left Daniel quiet for a moment. He didn't like the idea of his mother turning to someone else, but the reason Lila gave wasn't impossible to believe. Lila went on, "I didn't just clean. I worked here during the last 2 years of her life. 2 years when she dealt with more than you think. She trusted me because I'm not the type to talk much or pry, and she felt lighter when she spoke to me." Daniel froze. The last 2 years. He had no idea. Lila drew a slow breath, her voice softening with weight. There were nights she couldn't sleep. She would stand by the second-floor window, looking out at the garden, and she asked me the same question over and over. Daniel leaned forward. "She asked if you hated her." Daniel's chest tightened. The words pierced the armor he had worn for years. Lila continued, "There were times she cried. She regretted the moments she spoke too harshly and hurt you. She was afraid you believed she valued her work more than her family. She always said her son deserved a better mother." The living room fell silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat, like he was finally facing a truth that had been buried for far too long. He felt himself wavering. Not convinced, not yet, but something inside him shifted. An emotion he couldn't name slipped through the cracks of the old ones. A mix of affection, anger, and a strange sense of being unmoored. Daniel shook his head lightly. "But you were still an outsider. My mother never said anything like that to me." Lila looked at him with a sincerity that couldn't be faked. "That's only a small part." She bent down and pulled out an old wooden box tied with a thin ribbon. "Mrs. Victoria told me to give you this on the exact day she passed." Daniel's breath hitched. "Why today?" "I don't know," Lila said. "She only said this was the moment you'd be ready to see the truth." Daniel stared at the box for a long moment, then opened the lid. Inside were folded handwritten letters, a handkerchief embroidered with his name, and a small brass key that glimmered under the warm light. Daniel touched each item, feeling like he had brushed against something buried deep in his memory. Lila watched him, her voice soft but steady. "There's something more important. You need to hear everything." Daniel looked up, slightly taken aback. He knew this was only the beginning. And even though a part of him was still on guard, he had no choice but to face it. Because clearly, everything his mother left behind was telling him one thing. This truth belonged to him. The items inside the wooden box left Daniel silent for a long time. It was all too much, too unexpected, as if he had just opened a door that led straight into a part of his mother's life he had never touched. He could still hear Lila's last words echoing from before. "You need to hear everything." Daniel took a deep breath. He reached for the first letter in the box. His mother's handwriting appeared instantly. Strong, familiar strokes, but the ink had blurred in places, traces of tears. He froze for a moment, then opened the letter. One by one, he read through them. pages stretching across the years. Every sheet carried the marks of time, of feelings held back, of thoughts his mother had never spoken. Daniel read the first letter, then the second, then the third. All of them were letters she had written to him, but never sent. It felt like someone had squeezed his heart. It hurt, but not in a way that crushed him. It was the kind of pain that warmed something deep inside. In each letter, Victoria wrote without flourish, without trying to sound poetic, just honest lines that made Daniel pause again and again. My dear son, I am sorry for not being there when you needed me. I was afraid of failing. I was afraid that if you saw me weak, you would be disappointed. I built this empire because I thought it would mean you would never lack anything. But the farther I went, the harder it became to find my way back. I love you more than anything, but I never knew how to show it the right way. Daniel swallowed hard, rereading the last line again and again. She didn't know how to show it. He had always thought his mother was cold, distant, uncaring. But now he realized that distance wasn't intentional. It was the result of a woman who was scared she wasn't good enough, and he had mistaken her strength for a wall, instead of understanding that inside it might have been fear. Reading the letters brought back memories he thought had faded long ago. He remembered the time she promised to come watch his middle school piano performance, but her assistant showed up instead. He remembered the dinners where it was just the two of them, yet neither said a word. He remembered birthdays marked only by an expensive gift delivered to the door, while his mother was somewhere far away. Those were the things that had convinced Daniel his mother didn't love him. But through each letter, he saw a different Victoria. A woman who quietly watched over him, who was proud of him, but who was afraid to disrupt his life with the parts of herself she thought were not enough. Each letter was a piece of a puzzle, and Daniel finally began to see the whole picture. When he finished reading, Daniel looked at the small brass key next to the handkerchief. He picked it up and turned to Lila. "What is this key?" he asked softly. Lila answered right away. "It's the key to your mother's secret room." Daniel blinked. "A secret room?" "Yes," Lila nodded. "Mrs. Victoria only told me about it. She dedicated the entire room to things that belonged to you." Daniel's heartbeat jumped. Lila led him upstairs. The familiar hallway where he used to run around as a child now echoed with slow, heavy footsteps. The brown wooden door at the end of the hallway, the one his mother always kept locked. Lila stepped aside, inviting him to open it himself. Daniel slid the key into the lock and turned it gently. The door clicked open. Inside was an entire world. Photo albums of Daniel from the day he was born until now. Small items he thought were long gone. His toy car, his first pair of toddler shoes. The cards he made for his mother in elementary school, carefully laminated. An old cassette labeled by hand for Daniel, and a diary placed right at the center of the desk. Daniel stepped inside, almost afraid to disturb the sacred air in the room. Lila walked to the desk, picked up the cassette, and handed it to him. "You should listen to this first." Daniel pressed play. A soft static crackled. Then his mother's voice came through. Tired, weak, but so real it froze him in place. "If you're hearing this, it means I no longer have the chance to tell you myself. I made mistakes. So many mistakes, but I never stopped loving you, in my clumsy way." Her voice blurred Daniel's vision, not with loud sobs, but with quiet tears that came from something inside finally loosening. For the first time since his mother's death, Daniel let himself cry. Not because she was gone, but because he finally understood that she had been trying in her quiet, imperfect way with all the love she had. The letters, the secret room, the recording, they all came together to say what she never managed to say while she was alive, and Daniel felt it more clearly than ever. Lila stood beside him without interrupting. She let him face the truth in the gentlest way possible. Daniel turned to her. "You called me here because you wanted me to forgive her, didn't you?" Lila shook her head slowly, her eyes steady. "No, Daniel, I called you here because there's something even more important, and it has to do with you." Daniel was still sitting beside the cassette player when Layla quietly walked to the file cabinet in the corner of the room. She opened the bottom drawer, took out a thick bundle of documents tied with a thin rope, and placed it on the table in front of him. Daniel stared at the stack as if it were another door opening into a side of his mother he had never known. Lila sat across from him, her voice calm, so she wouldn't overwhelm him. He opened the file. Inside were receipts, photos, handwritten letters, even contracts signed by Victoria. Everything was organized neatly, carefully, like his mother had spent real time preparing it all for the day Daniel would need to know these things. Lila spoke softly. This is what she did for years, and no one ever knew. Daniel turned to the first page. He never expected something so simple to carry so much weight. The first truth revealed itself, clear and heavy enough to make him pause for a breath. Victoria had quietly helped hundreds of people. She paid school tuition for poor children in 3 different towns. She saved a family from bankruptcy with a cash donation that carried no name. She covered hospital bills for elderly people who had no one left. And in all of it, she never used her own name. She always signed as someone else, a separate identity she created so her kindness could stay invisible. Daniel looked through every receipt, every photo, every thank you letter addressed to the anonymous benefactor. He had never imagined his mother using her money not to show off or invest, but to save lives. Each page pulled him deeper into a reality he had never noticed. His mother had an entire life of compassion he had been blind to. Lila turned to the next section. And this is what she did for you. Daniel froze. In his hands were documents proving that during his freshman year of college, a sponsor had paid part of his tuition, something he never questioned. That sponsor was his mother. She had also quietly asked an old friend to intervene and help him keep his job when he almost got fired from his first project. Daniel remembered that time clearly. He thought he was just lucky to have a lenient supervisor. Now he realized his mother had been standing behind him the whole time. He flipped a few more pages. A photo slipped out and landed face down on the table. Daniel picked it up. It was a picture of him on stage at 17. During the guitar performance, he thought his mother skipped. The photo was taken from behind a large pillar in the hall. Whoever held the camera must have been hiding there so he wouldn't notice. Daniel set the picture down slowly, his hand trembling. All those years, he believed his mother didn't care. But she had been there, just standing in places where he couldn't see her. Lila watched his expression before continuing. Daniel, the third truth is about me. He looked up, still stunned. I'm not just the cleaning lady, Lila said, not with pride but with calm honesty. I lost my mother when I was young. My grandmother raised me. When Mrs. Victoria learned about it, she hired me. And after a while, she saw me as someone she could talk to. Daniel studied her carefully. She confided in you? Lila nodded. Because I didn't judge. I just listened. And because she was lonelier than you think. Then Lila pulled a small envelope from the stack of files. She wrote this 1 month before she passed. It says that if she was gone, and if you were ready, I had to help you understand why she lived the way she did. Daniel no longer knew what he was feeling. Everything in his mind felt overturned. Memories, assumptions, even old wounds. Lila turned to the final section of the file. Inside were documents directly tied to Daniel. Medical checkup reports, secretly sent to his mother through a private service. Papers showing the money she funneled into an emergency account just to make sure that if anything ever happened to him, he would always have something to fall back on. And dozens of photos she secretly took. Him walking home after work, him reading at a small cafe, him laughing with friends. Victoria had been watching over her son from a distance, step by step, moment by moment. Daniel sank into the chair, his hand still resting on the stack of papers. Every detail hit him straight in the heart. Not with pain, but with a wave of regret for not seeing any of this while his mother was still alive. Lila told him more about Victoria's final days. How her illness worsened, but she hid it because she didn't want to bother him. Because she thought he was busy with his new job. Because she feared that if he found out, he would feel obligated. And that obligation would only push them farther apart. Lila was the only one by her side during those days. She was the one who took Victoria to the hospital, the one who cared for her on the nights she was too weak to sit up. Then Lila told him the last thing Victoria ever said to her. If one day my son understands me, tell him I never stopped loving him, not for a single day. Daniel closed his eyes. That sentence made everything around him go silent. He didn't feel angry, he didn't feel upset, only a deep, steady quiet, like the quiet of someone who has finally found something they had been searching for their entire life. He sat there for a long moment. Lila didn't say anything else. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, he whispered, almost to himself, the truth isn't some awful secret at all. He looked at the stack of documents, at the secret room, at everything his mother had left behind. This is love. After finishing the entire file, Daniel needed a few hours to steady himself. He left the secret room, walked down to the back garden, and sat on the wooden bench his mother used to sit on. The truth he had just uncovered was still fresh in his mind, but he knew he needed to hear more from the people who had stood beside her. That afternoon, he visited Mrs. Rowan, the elderly neighbor who had lived next to the mansion for more than 30 years. When Daniel walked in, she looked at him with eyes that held both sympathy and understanding, as if she had been waiting for this day. She invited him to sit on her old sofa and gently held his hand. She spoke about Victoria in the slow, steady voice of someone who had witnessed an entire lifetime. Victoria was stronger than anyone she had ever met, yet she was the kind of person who broke the easiest when it came to family. Mrs. Rowan told him that on many nights she saw his mother standing on the balcony for a long time, just watching the light from Daniel's room across the yard. Then Victoria would quietly return inside, wipe away her tears, and go back to work. She always regretted not knowing how to help the two of them understand each other better. No matter how strong she was, Victoria had fears that only the closest people to her could feel. Daniel sat quietly, taking in every word. For the first time, he understood that his mother wasn't cold the way he had always believed. She just didn't know how to love in the way he wished. Her love was quiet, wordless, and always focused on building his future. Working without rest, giving up her time, carrying her loneliness so he could have an easier life. She took the hardest part for herself so the rest would be lighter for him. It wasn't a soft or warm kind of love, but it was steady, like an old tree that stays rooted through every storm. After leaving Mrs. Rowan's house, Daniel went to Attorney Cole's office because he had asked to see him. When Daniel walked in, the lawyer placed a sealed envelope on the desk and slid it toward him. "Mrs. Victoria wanted me to give this to you after she passed." Daniel opened the envelope. Inside was a single letter, written in the same handwriting he recognized from the notes in the wooden box. He read each line slowly. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. I am sorry for the distance between us. But if you are ready, spend the rest of your life loving more than I ever did." The letter was short, but the simple words made Daniel's throat tighten. His mother didn't try to justify anything. She didn't list her sacrifices. She only hoped he would live better than she did, with a heart more open than hers. When he returned to the mansion, Daniel walked straight up to the secret room. He turned on the light and let the warm glow settle over everything inside. He opened the wooden box again, touched the cassette, then the handkerchief embroidered with his name. Every item held a piece of his mother's memory. He looked at the photos, the cards, the albums. Each small object warmed the room in a way he couldn't explain. Every detail said the same thing. She had loved him more than he ever believed. In that quiet, Daniel began to understand that forgiveness wasn't about erasing mistakes. Forgiveness was letting his heart feel lighter. It was choosing not to carry the weight of the past anymore. It was moving forward without regret or resentment. He didn't need to forgive his mother for anything specific. He only needed to release the distance between them, a distance he now knew had never been intentional. In the room, Lila stood in the corner, keeping just enough distance. She didn't interrupt his thoughts. She didn't add anything else. She understood that Daniel was facing his pain in the deepest way. She simply stayed there, quiet, like someone witnessing an important moment. Daniel noticed that, and he realized Lila was the bridge that had carried him through this entire journey with his mother. Because of her, all the scattered pieces had come together into a complete picture. When night finally settled, Daniel folded the last letter and took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. When he stood up, his eyes no longer felt as heavy as before. He looked around the room one last time and said, as if reminding himself, "Mom wanted me to live better." And that was exactly what he decided to do. Daniel would live with more kindness, just as his mother hoped in her final days. Daniel returned to his mother's house on a gentle morning. Sunlight passed through the large windows and lit up the living room in a way he had never noticed before. This time, everything in his view no longer felt like the emptiness of distance. He saw traces of his mother in every small corner. The chair where she used to read the newspaper, the vase she changed every week, the tablecloth she liked, even though he once thought it looked outdated. Those details no longer felt lonely. They became proof that his mother had lived here, had loved this place, and had loved him in a quiet way he was only now beginning to understand. Lila was wiping the wooden dining table. Daniel watched her for a moment, then asked, his voice deep but lighter than it had been in days. "Why did you do all this for me? Calling me here, showing me the secret room, giving me the letters, helping me face everything. Why you?" Lila looked up, her eyes clear but deeper than they appeared. She gave him a gentle smile, one that carried more meaning than the words she was about to say. "Because your mother did all those good things for other people. She helped people she didn't know. She helped people who had nothing to offer her. And she saved me from a terrible part of my life." She placed a hand over her chest. "I just wanted to keep my promise to her, to help you understand her. That was the last thing she wanted." Daniel fell silent. He looked at Lila and saw the natural continuation of his mother's heart. Not a replacement, but someone who had been close to the parts of his mother he had never reached. His chest felt lighter, as if Lila had handed him the key to a door he had kept locked for too long. That afternoon, Daniel stood before his mother's desk in the upstairs office. The place that had witnessed hundreds of projects, important contracts, and the decisions that shaped her career. He placed his hand on the surface, still marked by time. He knew he wasn't like his mother when it came to business or leadership, but he realized he could be like her in one way: kindness. Daniel decided he would continue the charitable work his mother had quietly done. He created a scholarship fund named the Victoria Hale Foundation to support children in difficult situations. He helped families who had gone through hardships like the ones his mother once saved. He reached out to nursing homes to keep paying for the elderly residents his mother had sponsored. Every action was his way of saying, "I understand now, Mom." Lila stayed by his side, not as someone replacing his mother, but as someone who understood her in the same way he was learning to. There was no rush between them. No sudden romance or forced moments. Just two people who had both been shaped by loss and who found common ground in the kindness Victoria left behind. Lila helped Daniel organize documents, plan the charity fund, and contact the people Victoria once supported. She didn't enter his life loudly. Her presence was like soft morning light, warm enough to make someone believe tomorrow could be better. One quiet weekend afternoon, Daniel walked around the grounds of the estate. He thought about everything he had been through in just a few days. The regret, the pain, then the healing. He understood now that his mother's love wasn't perfect, but it was still real. And sometimes a silent kind of love only needs the one left behind to look a little deeper to see how much it truly meant. People can leave this world, but the kindness they plant lives on in the things we choose to continue. That day, Daniel visited his mother's grave. The sky was clear and the breeze was gentle, like the weather of a new beginning. He placed a bouquet of white flowers, the ones she used to like. He stood before the stone engraved with her name and felt a calm settle around him. No more anger, no more disappointment, only understanding. He bowed his head and whispered, "I know the truth now. Thank you for everything. I promise I'll live better, be kinder, and I'm proud to be your son." Daniel stayed a moment longer, letting the wind carry his promise. When he finally turned to leave, his steps were lighter. No more heavy footsteps, no more unanswered questions. He walked out of the cemetery with a clearer heart, as if his mother were watching him and smiling. That day, a journey of healing began, and the flame Victoria left in his heart was lit again, ready to spread into the world through his own kindness.